I'm Larry Berkelhammer, and I have with me Dr. Eric Pepper, a world-renowned authority on psychophysiological self-regulation. We're going to be discussing some things that have been of great interest to me and that hopefully will be interesting and useful to you. First thing I want to ask you about is something that I've read about, and it has to do with the fact that people recover unexpectedly from cancer and other serious diseases after taking on a new persona or adopting a new global mythology or going on a journey, like a shamanic journey. It doesn't have to be a traditional shamanic journey, but having some shift in their personality and consciousness, and understanding that by shifting, we can increase the chance of healing. When I studied briefly with Lawrence Lashan, author of Cancer as a Turning Point, he had something he called acting as if. And I actually had an experience where one night about 25 years ago, I found myself coming down with all the symptoms of influenza. And I started watching a karate tournament on TV. I got so into it, I felt like I was suddenly transformed. I was the guy in the ring. I wasn't me anymore. I was a karate fighter. 2 hours later, now, when I started watching at 8 o'clock, I had severe body aches. I had fever, chills, extreme fatigue. 2 hours later, as this karate fighter, I was all better, 100% recovered. What's that about?
Well, I think that is probably the million-dollar question in some sense for medicine. At the same time, mind, body are not separate, and that's the error people have made. We often think of body and mind being separate, and it's mind, body, spirit being connected, or consciousness. And so in a way, if I start feeling the soreness, and now I start pulling all the pictures of hopelessness, of more pain, I pull in negative images of health. And you could say almost in our energetic field, we now build a picture of illness. And that picture is probably what we become. To a certain extent, if that picture shifts and I have a picture of health there, then as the body reconstitutes itself or grows, that health is built in. So in that sense, the concept that the person needs to have a shift in consciousness, a shift in belief, is critical. It's not that different than one of the famous doctors reported. He had a patient who was a cardiac patient in the hospital. The patient had a galloping heartbeat.
Yeah, that's right.
He called all
the
patient, his students come to listen to this heart. Mm-hmm. And he said to his residents, I guess, listen to this galloping heart. And what he meant is listen to it so you know, because that's very much pathological. This person will probably die.
A wholesome gallop of a heart is a term used to describe a very serious dysrhythmia.
That's right.
People often don't survive what would be described as a wholesome gallop.
Correct. And in fact, this patient survived, and years later, the doctor asked him what happened. And he said, well, when you just asked your residents or so to listen to my heart, and you said it was like a galloping heart, I thought of horses, and I know I had lots of life left into me. Yeah. And that core piece. So probably there are two components. One, in a moment, is the acceptance where I am. And the second is having a hope for the future and not keep pulling in your past illnesses in your mind's eye. So when you do, after a healing, feel better, the question is, I'm so appreciative where I am. Mm-hmm. What other people do sometimes, you can hear it in the language, they say, how long will this last? And in that question, they're really pulling in the memory of illness. But finally, we have to remember, even with the most positive thinking, as I said earlier, life is the only illness with a fatal prognosis. Right. It is not all in our hands. All we can do is we can support that.
But I want to go back that night when I was watching the karate tournament. I wasn't practicing positive thinking. I became, in my mind, I was someone else. I wasn't this sick person. I was this karate fighter in the ring. I had taken on another persona.
And when you took on that role, your whole body shifted.
It did.
It's just like when you fall in love. At that moment, when you
can
anticipate
feel,
somebody, you feel this energy just rising in you. You feel more alive.
Yes, right.
And you did this in a sense unknowingly, taking on that other role, and all of a sudden, and then your body follows to a large extent. And look how opposite this is versus those dreadful pictures you would pull and, oh, I'm getting sick.
Of course, of course. But what is it? How did, physiologically, without us getting into the actual biochemical processes, I'm curious if we can explain for people how this might work physiologically.
The only way you can say it to me is that thoughts and body are similar, are interconnected. When I ask you to take a lemon, look at it for a moment, cut it in half, squeeze the lemon, put it in a glass.
I'm already salivating.
And now drink the lemon juice, all in your imagination, you're salivating.
Yep.
You've made a physiological change.
Right.
And so Elmer Green's early principle, which was called psychophysiological principle, which really said every thought, every emotion has a corresponding body activity and vice versa. What we are really unaware of are our conscious and unconscious thoughts. What you did at that moment became a total unity.
Yeah.
And in that sense, you're very similar to multiple personality patients, patients with multiple personality. In one personality, they can be asthmatic, or they can be allergic to poison oak.
In fact, in one personality might have green eyes, and the other personality might have brown eyes or blue eyes.
Yes, but even the ones on the allergies are easier to health. That I can stroke you with poison oak in one personality.
Yeah.
You give total body reaction.
Yes.
You switch personality, it totally goes away, and you can lie on it and have no reactivity.
Well, there was a study done in Japan where they rubbed poison ivy on the forearms of these teenage boys, telling them this is a perfectly harmless leaf. They didn't react.
That's right.
They then took a harmless leaf, rubbed it on them, told them this is poison ivy. They reacted as if it was poison ivy.
Correct.
And they hadn't even taken on a persona. They were just.
So our expectancies, and they work together. So our health is not only expectancies. You know, otherwise it would be too simple, and then we blame the patient. You know, it's sort of like if you are exposed to cholera, you probably will get sick. That's my belief structure. And so, you know, it's always this balance. But what you're talking about really, and we're talking about, is saying, how can I optimize my own self-healing potential? And the data is quite overwhelming, that if you have a more optimistic, positive view of self, you do better. And so ask yourself really, how do you think about yourself? Do you see yourself as basically healthy? Or do you see yourself as basically sick?
Right.
And if you see yourself as sick, start asking, what do I need to do in thought and actions so I can start changing that persona to being healthy?
I used to go around visiting chronic illness support groups. And what I found is that the majority of them were actually supporting each other in illness. So people would come in, and it felt wonderful to be able to share with someone the pain they were in, the fatigue, the disability, and to hear people who know from personal experience, I know what you're going through because I have this too, but in the process, they were actually reinforcing how bad they felt. And I think it's much more important that support groups, patient support groups, focus more on skill building. I trained briefly with James S. Gordon, who created the Center for Mind-Body Medicine. And he created skill building groups, which I think are the most valuable thing we can do.
And in the work, for example, in cancer, there's a great research by Barbara Anderson, who did an 11-year follow-up on breast cancer patients. And so they have these 160 or so breast cancer patients, the exact number I've forgotten. And half the group, they're randomized. One group gets an additional treatment, you know, and the other group are just followed up. The additional treatment is a group process, 3 hours a week for about 14 weeks. It's basically skill building. It is being able to talk to the physician, getting some support. Now they follow these women out over 11 years. What you see is a change in survival. The ones who had the support group, they have better survival, they have lower remission rates than the ones who did not.
Yep.
which is just what you're saying. It's
Yeah.
the skill mastery,
Right.
because it's a shift from feeling powerless to saying, when I feel lousy, there is something I can do. And we all know, when we are doing something which feels like that is beneficial, we feel like more empowered, we feel lighter.
And that has a physiological effect.
Correct. It is the physiological
Thank
effect.
you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
Yeah.